Welcome, gentle traveler, to ancient wonders, a quiet corner on your journey, where stones speak in murmurs and centuries drift like desert mist. As you settle, feel free to let us know from what corner of the wide world you are listening, for each reply is another soft lantern along our shared path, illuminating how far the Great Pyramid's allure still reaches. High above the tawny expanse, dawn glimmers with the palest gold, and the desert stretches outward like an enormous sail caught in a wind of silence. From this calm height, the Great Pyramid rises, a single, deliberate shape carved against the horizon, its lines at once crisp and softened by distance. No carriage wheels, no modern hum disturbs the image only, the whisper of quiet air beneath invisible wings, carrying us closer to that colossal frontispiece of human imagination. Morning light glides over limestone, finding every shallow groove left by ancient chisels, every subtle shift where blocks breathe against one another. The pyramid appears motionless, yet a faint shimmer of warmth suggests the stored memory of countless sunrises, a reservoir of days poured carefully into stone. From above, its geometry feels unnervingly simple. On the ground, though, simplicity dissolves into a maze of joints, chambers, and questions that have hovered for 45 centuries like curious birds refusing to fly away. Why, after so long, does this monument still our thoughts? Perhaps because it binds together opposites, enormity and precision, permanence and passing breath, the ambition of a single sovereign, and the labor of thousands whose names drift beyond record. We feel, gazing downward, the sharpened point where personal desire touches collective capacity, and beyond that, the murmur of an even deeper wish to push one's lifetime beyond the reach of ordinary decay. Far beneath our slow-moving shadow lies the entrance half concealed by restorations, yet still leading inward like a sigh. Passages tilt, ascend, and taper. Polished granite gleams where torches once sputtered. Rising chambers seem to breathe in the darkness, content to wait. Some say hidden voids remain, uncharted pockets of possibility, whispers left deliberately for future listeners. Others trace slender shafts aimed at stars, long set, searching for messages written not in ink, but in alignment. Within those silent corridors, one mystery overshadows the rest. How, with copper tools and corded dreams, did builders raise more than 2 million blocks, each coaxed into place with scarcely a finger's breadth of error? From above, the pyramid is one shape. Up close, it is an anthology of stones, each declaring that hands can achieve an almost impossible conversation with gravity. We will follow those hands in time, tracing quarries, ramps, perhaps forgotten machines, letting their ingenuity reveal itself slowly. There is ambition here, towering and unapologetic, yet we sense it carried on the patient rhythm of seasons rather than the rush of conquest. Stones traveled by river when the Nile swelled in generosity. Taskmasters counted heartbeats in the measured fall of sunlit shadows. Scribes noted deliveries while ibis called across wetlands now withdrawn. Through repetition, a tomb became a mountain one that promised King Khufu a horizon beyond mortality, a platform from which his spirit might forever greet the dawn. Even now, the monument's mass quiets talk of human frailty. Ingenuity, shaped by unwavering purpose, turns sand and sunlight into a stance against oblivion. The pyramid does not thunder. It hums, low and level, letting wind, shadow, and the slow tilt of constellations carry its chord across millennia. The same note reaches us in our unseen craft, circling at gentle height, waiting for the desert to finish its sentence. Around the base, desert sands ripple like pale water, yet the bedrock holds the weight without complaint. Geologists point to a gentle limestone rise chosen with clear-eyed pragmatism. Priests might have whispered of sacred ground. Modern engineers simply marvel that the surface remained level within a child's thumbnail across its whole vast square. There, on that prepared canvas, Geometry met geology, and together they folded time upon itself, so that workers chiseling under the sun might, unknowingly, lay touchstones for unborn thinkers. When dusk begins its measured descent, the polished granite of the king's chamber would blush in violet hush. Yet from our early morning vantage, that chamber is only an inference, a dark square nested in memory. Still, we sense it. 5 relieving stones stacked like calm breaths, supporting the weight of heaven for the safekeeping of a single royal vessel. We will descend there soon, allowing the cool air and star-pointed shafts to speak about ceremony, resonance, and perhaps the quiet heartbeat of stone. For now, drifting higher, we notice how the other pyramids play supporting roles, like smaller notes in a solemn chord. Khafre's structure, slightly taller in illusion because of its plateau, and Menkare's modest outline, its casing incomplete. Together they compose a landscape of graduated aspirations, but Khufu's edifice remains the anchor, the stone giant whose shoulders steady the rest. Around them, mastabas spread like ripples from a dropped pebble, each limestone bench a declaration that ordinary lives too sought a fragment of eternity. Slowly, the sun climbs higher, and with each incremental rise, the pyramid's shadow shortens, as though time itself is turning a careful page. Within that shadow once marched lines of workers, their songs carried on drums of wooden mallets, striking copper. We imagine the scent of crushed reeds used to lubricate sledges, the cool surprise of wet sand underfoot, the rare cheer when a block settled perfectly and the overseer's measuring string lay without a quiver. In those moments, ambition was not a roar but an accumulating murmur, a steady layering of effort that made ordinary dawn sacred. By keeping such a rhythm, the builders borrowed from the endlessness they sought to serve, one block, one song, one breath at a time. Generations later, travelers would write of their disbelief. Scholars would map passageways in trembling lamplight. Satellites would scan the plateau with beams invisible to the eye. Yet the monument remains slightly ahead of every explanation, like an elder smiling at the ingenuity of children. From this tranquil height, it is easy to forget that the pyramid once gleamed in polished white, its casing stones fitted so finely that seams all but disappeared beneath the desert sun. That bright skin has mostly slipped away, scavenged for later cities or tumbled by earthquakes, but its absence lets imagination breathe. We picture the monument shimmering like a frozen beam of daylight, its point offering a fingertip to the gods, and we wonder how pilgrims must have felt seeing it ignite in the first light of morning. A little farther west, the plateau dissolves into dunes that shift under every breeze, yet the pyramid's mass remains steadfast. That tension between the mutable and the unmoved gives the landscape its subtle cadence, like a drumbeat stretched over an almost infinite measure. Sand grains journey, stars precess, empires appear and fade, yet the corners of Khufu's monument still point, almost perfectly, to cardinal directions, as if reminding the sky of its obligations. In coming chapters we will walk quarries east of the Nile, trace seasonal canals that bore stone, and step onto ramps real, or imagine that spiraled with sand and wooden sledges. We will descend into the burial chamber, where the air is as calm as the inside of a seashell, and explore satellite pyramids built for queens and Ka spirits. We will ask whether the monument was meant as a machine for resurrection, an astronomical map, or simply the grandest proof of earthly power. All those inquiries, however, must remain gentle, unrushed, respectful of the lingering silence that guards the monument. For each explanation we place upon it is only a parchment pressed to stone. The pyramid will outlast our theories as effortlessly as it outlasted the pharaohs who followed. Its true purpose may be plural, shifting depending on the light, but the feeling it stirs is singular, a hush that opens somewhere between the sternum and the throat, asking us to pause, breathe, and consider the long arc of human yearning. So we linger a moment longer in the cool of this imagined altitude, letting the pyramid's quiet magnitude settle like evening dew. The sky brightens, but the monument remains unhurried, unconcerned, aware that time is its true element. Around us, the desert stirs with a subtle rustle, the day's first breeze perhaps, or the collective sigh of sand remembering ancient footfalls. We hold our course, neither rising nor falling, simply floating at the edge of history's breath. In the gentle stillness, a glint appears downstream where the river bends, a quiet promise of quarries and boats, poised to move stone through wheat-colored light. We face that shimmer, prepared to follow the stone's first voyage, yet we do not hurry. The pyramid stays behind us, vast and calm, while ahead the story gathers like a slow current. When we meet again, we will reach the place where raw cliff first felt the chisel, and listen to the opening echo of creation. When last we drifted away from the Nile's whisper, moonlight still lingered over the stepped monument of Giza, its pale terraces holding the hush of early dynastic dreams. Night has since deepened, the constellations sliding westward, and in their silent journey they carry the promise of a new chapter, the slow unfurling of a pharaoh's vision so vast that it will reshape the desert horizon. The hush remains, but it thickens, like fine linen layered upon sleeping limbs, for the chronicle ahead will unfold, not in hurried proclamation, but in measured somnolent breaths, revealing how a single sovereign, Khufu, son of Sneferu, stirred beneath those ancient stars and felt destiny settle upon his brow. He rose within a court already attuned to grandeur, for his father had clad bent pyramid and red pyramid in shining limestone, leaving the desert scattered with angled echoes. Yet where Sneferu had tested shapes, Khufu pondered scale. He imagined not merely a tomb, but an axis mundi, a stone translation of the hieroglyph for horizon, a place where the sun might be reborn each dawn between monumental flanks. From childhood corridors perfumed with incense, he listened to priests recite the litany of Ra, and in their melodic cadences he discerned a covenant that king, if he would truly be divine, must build a stair for the sun itself. A mortal lifetime seemed suddenly spacious enough to house only that single, colossal act. There was, as always, another rhythm beneath religion's murmur, the steady cadence of politics. To keep the two lands braided together, a pharaoh needed more than flaxen crowns and lapis inlay. He needed spectacle, and spectacle required stone. Governors on distant floodplains might drift toward autonomy unless anchored by reverence, so Khufu conceived a monument too massive to ignore, a geometric decree telling every village, every caravan, that authority radiated from his person like light from Aten. Ma'at would be rendered solid, as precise as a mason's plumb line, so that even dissent would feel superfluous amid such mathematical serenity. Having stirred motives, sacred and secular, into a single resolve, the royal eye walked the river's banks in search of a stage. North of the old capital, the land climbed gently, a tawny shelf overlooking the water, firm underfoot and serenaded by prevailing winds that swept debris away. It was called Giza, a plateau of megalithic limestone, washed smooth by vanished seas. Here bedrock lay near the surface, steady enough to cradle impossible weight, yet near enough to quarries that barges could drift downriver with their cargo like lotus petals. The horizon behind was empty, an untouched parchment awaiting hieroglyphs of stone. Selecting the site was a whispering act of augury. Priests spread cords, observed the stars circling the northern sky, and charted the invisible compass points embedded in cosmic order. Their calculations, recited in hushed voices, convinced Khufu that Giza sat beneath an auspicious ceiling, eternal circumpolar constellations that never set, guardians fit for a god-king's sleep. They saw, too, how the plateau's western verge tilted toward the land of dusk, the proper realm of the dead, while its eastern edge faced the sunrise that nourished the living. Between those liminal lights, the pyramid would flourish, a bridge between now and forever. To translate yearning into geometry, Khufu summoned his half-cousin Hemiunu, vizier, high priest, and master of scribes, whose reed pens copied the silence of stars into rows of numbers. Hemiunu carried the intellect of an architect and the patience of a librarian. Within the pulse of royal ambition, he felt the slow harp-string of proportion, the tug of squares and diagonals waiting to be teased into form. Around him gathered surveyors, draftsmen, stonecutters, and the four quiet mathematicians of the House of Life, each skilled in a craft honed through generations that had shaped Saqqara and Dasha. But now they faced an edict without precedent. Build the world's axis, and do so with such clarity that its lines would persuade even millennia. But Mayans, the design brief emerged in low-lit council chambers scented with myrrh. It called for a square whose sides would mirror the cardinal directions within a hair's breadth, a height rising like the sun's oblique climb to zenith, and internal chambers aligned so cunningly with celestial shafts that a soul might ascend toward the indestructible stars. Mortuary temples, causeways, satellite pyramids for queens, and a fleet of cedar boats interred in stone-lined pits, all wove into the plan like threads of a single tapestry. Yet amid these vast outlines, each detail remained intimate. A corridor sloped just gentle enough for pallbearers, a niche carved for a ceremonial oar, a threshold polished to reflect torchlight the way moonlight kisses river water. Budgets in the Old Kingdom were not tables of coin, but ledgers of grain, beer, copper tools, and blessed time. Hemiunu arranged expeditions to the quarries of Tura, where limestone gleamed buttery white, and to Aswan, where granite slumbered in pink moonlit slabs. Overseers counted oxen, draft ropes, wooden sledges, and the seasonal cadence of corvée labor. During inundation, when fields rested beneath silted water, farmers would lend their strength, receiving royal rations that would, in turn, return to their families as bread. Thus, the pyramid became an engine of redistribution, a quiet granary of goodwill, turning economic gears even as its stones ascended. Time itself had to be portioned like incense grains in a censer. The calendar of Sothic risings predicted flood, sowing, harvest, and festival. Each phase generated a rhythm of workforce availability. Planners unfolded papyrus scrolls, showing 10, 20, perhaps 30 years of coordinated tasks, a choreography in which one misstep could echo disastrously. Wooden beams for sledges seasoned under shade. Copper chisels received ritual sharpening, and basalt-pounding stones were ferried along canals before the first block was even dreamed of leaving bedrock. Deliberation masqueraded as stillness, yet within that hush the future hummed. All the while, royal scribes etched progress onto stelae destined for temple courts. These inscriptions were not mere records. They were propaganda carved to outlast the tellers. By advertising shipments of alabaster, or tallying cubic cubits of masonry, the texts conjured an image of inexhaustible abundance. Nomarchs reading them would perceive a king whose resources flowed like the Nile in perpetual inundation, and common laborers, glimpsing the same marks, might feel comfort in the notion that their toil composed a story too sacred to be forgotten. Stone, therefore, served a double duty, sheltering the dead and persuading the living. Beyond ledgers and decrees breathed the quiet households of the valley, reed-roofed dwellings where the smell of baking emmer drifted towards sycamore groves. In the evening glow, children traced imaginary pyramids in the dust, while elders recalled Sneferu's expeditions. Thus, the grand design seeped into lullabies and kitchen talk long before the first block moved. For those families, conscription to Giza promised not only rations but stories to carry home, tales of seeing the king's banner ripple above the plateau, of watching the blue of distant hills expand beneath dawnlight. The project, therefore, was less a command than a seasonal migration of hope, threading villages together like beads on a single necklace of Nile silt, each bead shining subtly under starlight. Priests, too, prepared, gathering pigments for wall scenes, yet to be painted, composing hymns that would one day echo through a valley temple still unimagined. They spoke of Akhet Khufu, horizon of Khufu, the anticipated name of the pyramid complex, and in their chant the syllables sounded like the rustle of papyrus under moon wind. They envisioned resurrective rites in chambers smelling of cedar resin where a statue would receive the breath of life while trumpets murmured. Every component, even unseen, already possessed ritual mass. Nothing was merely functional. A ramp was an emblem of ascension, a casing stone, a frozen sunray. The quarried voids, sacred negative space through which the monarch's car would glide as effortlessly as ibis wings skim evening water. In such carefully tended stillness, Khufu's dream began to acquire the weight of inevitability. The plateau's first survey pegs glinted in morning sun, casting slim shadows exactly parallel to the river. At evening, when stars blossomed over the desert like pale lotus petals, the pharaoh observed from a portable throne, satisfied yet serene, as though the pyramid were already there, invisible but palpable, a vast hush pressed against the horizon. The desert accepted the vision without protest. Wind coned future causeways, and distant jackals gave muted calls that seemed to bless the enterprise. The night draws further inward, and the plateau, though scarcely altered, now holds invisible grids, allocations, and vows, a silent city of intentions waiting to turn into terraces of stone. In the next gentle chapter, the tale will drift into quarry mouths where workers awaken to cool pre-dawn air, readying the first titanic blocks for their slow voyage north, and the quiet knocking of copper against limestone will become the heartbeat of Khufu's unfolding eternity, gathering the rhythm as though it were a lullaby composed for the sleeping gods. Moonlight still lingered on the desert's rim where the plateau met the sky, recalling the quiet close of the previous tale, when torch tips flickered along half-finished courses of khaki stone, and the great pyramid seemed to breathe in sleep. In that pale hush, the labor of yesterday felt remote, a memory folded into warm sand. Yet beneath the calm, the story of movement was waiting movement of minds, of minerals, of 1,000 purposeful feet, ready to coax mountains toward the river. Not far to the east, beyond a ribbon of fertile fields, the Mokattam Hills rose in rounded silence. Within their pale flanks lay Tura, a quarry of limestone so fine that its surface could drink dawn and return it as muted gold. Centuries of Nile breezes had sifted over the ridge, but the stone beneath remained cool, crisp, and dense, each block promising a future sheen that would catch sunrise on Khufu's monument like a quiet lantern. Miners knew the promise well. They entered on low ramps, their footsteps absorbed by dust the color of cream, tracing subtle seams that knit the bedrock into tidy squares. Down in the working chambers, lamplight pressed amber halos onto walls already ghost-bright, revealing chisel strokes delicate as reed script. Picks of tamarisk and stone had once nibbled here, yet by Khufu's reign, bronze-bright copper tinted the air with a scent like distant rain. Shafts rose and widened, roofed by quick arches of untouched rock, so that every blow sang softly, then settled. Nothing abrupt, nothing jagged, only a measured conversation between tool and mountain. While Tura offered the robe of the pyramid, the plateau beneath the building site surrendered its own rougher core. Layers of tawny limestone just meters from Khufu's foundation were trimmed into bulk masses that would never be seen once clothed in Tura's smooth skin. Quarrying near at hand spared the haul of millions of inner blocks, and each ledge newly cut became a casual ramp, extending construction levels in slow spirals. Thus the plateau itself became both pedestal and quarry, a marriage of place and purpose, guiding the structure upward with minimal fuss and graceful economy of strain. Copper, though soft beside iron dreams yet to come, answered the call of limestone with surprising resilience. Ingots shipped from Sinai camps were smelted in low adobe furnaces. Bellows of goatskin pulsed gentle gusts that reddened charcoal beds until metal shimmered like liquid amber. Softly hammered, chilled in brine, reheated and hammered again, the copper gained a tempered skin able to score stone without crumpling. Archaeologists who have copied those steps in modern deserts speak of an unexpected harmony. When the edge is kept keen and the blow is rhythmic, the chisel glides rather than grinds, coaxing out neat slivers that fall like pale petals. Experimental hands, guided by journals and a patient respect for old intentions, have traced the same wedge marks visible in turret shafts. They report that a trained crew, elbows loose and breaths even, can free a block the size of a water buffalo before the sun lifts midway up the vault of sky. Mallets tap, wedges creep, a crack races in near silence, and the mountain yields a child of perfect proportions, as though the stone were only waiting to travel. The past, they say, is not a marvel of mystery, but a hymn of practice, repeated until muscle and mineral breathe in unison. Once freed, each block turned from the scented dark of the quarry toward the broad silver of the river. Here the pulse of the Nile set the metronome of movement. In high water months, the valley deepened its color. Fields gleamed, and canals laced the plain like shy tributaries. Barges, long and shallow, could glide almost to the quarry footings, easing the burden of drag. When water fell, sandbars stretched like lazy cats, insisting on sledges, skimming over damp clay or rollers coaxed along reed-lined tracks. Season upon season, the river's timeless breathing governed every timetable, and planners listened with patient devotion. A case of planked acacia, mooring ropes thick as wrists, snaked over bollards. On decks, crews stacked blocks in dovetailed grids, aligning weight along central planks so cedar ribs would not groan too loudly. Sailcloth waited until the faintest northerly twitched. Then yards swung, and the flotilla, low in the water yet confident, followed the current downstream south wind above, north flow below, a gentle equilibrium. Oars were mostly for steering, dipping without rush, stirring green reflections of palm crowns that swayed like slow applause. Behind this elegant choreography stood the quiet engine of an agrarian realm. Ledgers inked on flake and ostraka charted barley harvests, linen allotments, and the precious rations of work gangs. During flood months, when fields slept beneath silt and farmers were briefly unneeded, families offered hands to state projects in exchange for grain and the promise of cosmic stability. Administrators at depots counted, reassigned, and delivered, their voices low, their styluses leaving calm trails across damp clay. Supply was not spectacle, but steady breath, the unseen reassurance that bread would reach every tent, and copper every striking arm. Village lanes far from royal glare carried their own muffled rhythm, mortars thumping husks, looms clapping in languid cadence. Children heard rumors of stone that would climb taller than any palm, yet for them the marvel was simpler. A father gone upriver would return with stories, with combs carved from leftover limestone with pride that the house of Khufu might stand forever. Thus did domestic routine weave itself into state ambition, a tapestry of quiet trades and unremarked devotions coloring the long river valley. Toward the end of the inundation season, when dawn still felt cool but the sky promised heat, a single delivery is imagined, a soft reenactment thought by moonwatchers. Centuries later, the barge slides against a Giza wharf, its hull sighing as ropes find moorings. Onshore sand has been dampened during the night so that sledges will glide without shriek. Torches gutter. Birds consider song but wait. Foremen murmur count and cadence, yet nothing pierces the hush. The first block, pale as milk, is coaxed onto a cradle of wood tied with braided flax. A crew of 40, toes gripping sand, lean into rope traces. They do not shout. A singer near the pole begins a low hum, each note stretching into the next like a river without bends. Feet move together, heels lifting in practiced arcs. Ahead, a water-bearer trickles from a jar, darkening the path so grains will lock and form a film of near-liquid clay under the runners. The block, 6,000 frozen kilograms, seems to float, its mass dissolved in mutual timing. Closer to the pyramid's base, ramps of rubble sprout, like gentle tongues, their surfaces paved with limed gypsum to smooth the ascent. The slope is shallow, forgiving. Rising, the block meets dawnlight full on its flank. In that moment, the stone blushes with a tender rose, fleeting, then settles into warm ivory. The crew heave once, twice, guiding it into a waiting void where masons tap wooden moulds, persuading edges into fidelity with adjoining courses. A thin paste of gypsum and powdered limestone is smeared, not to glue but to cushion, granting the block a bed as forgiving as river silt. When alignment is sure, mallets cease. The singer's hum tapers off and mingles with the first clear notes of ibis on the floodplain. Sweat cools on shoulders. Copper chisels rest across knees like tired finches. What remains of the morning belongs to scribes who will record numbers and quality, to water carriers who will salve throats, to the quiet satisfaction of another fraction of height earned. No proclamation marks the moment, yet the pyramid measures it with silent arithmetic. Sunrise now spills freely over the eastern ridge, gilding the still open face of the quarry, gliding down the river like molten lotus petals, and at last warming the plateau where thousands of stones, some new, some ancient, by a matter of weeks, wait in stacked serenity. From above, they resemble the grains of a vast hourglass frozen in mid-pour, each tiny monument promising participation in something calmly immense. So the turning of quarries, forges, river, and ramp settles again into steady orbit, an unseen constellation of effort, guiding stone toward sky. With every block that meets its final bedding, with every ledger line that balances barley against sweat, the invisible framework of organization reveals itself, broad yet delicate, like the lattice inside a lotus stem. Evening will come, torches will bloom, and the plateau will sigh once more, cradling the labor of the day as gently as before. In the next unfolding, the tale will drift upward along those newborn courses to ponder the geometry that binds them. The surveying rods, the star-watched plumbs, and the calm mathematics that coaxed horizons into right angles. But for now the quarry rests, the river lulls, and the pyramid, ever patient, when dusk finally folded its lavender veil across the Nile, the memory of timber barges sliding past stands of papyrus lingered like an echo in the half-light. There, cargo blocks of pale limestone still glimmering with river mist had been set gently on the western shore, and Chapter 3 drifted to rest upon that quiet image of stone awaiting hands. Now the hush settles over those hands themselves, over the myriad lives that gathered beneath the desert ridge known today as Kafr el-Gabel, a modest village cradled between bluff and floodplain, cradled too for an unlikely army of artisans. They were not soldiers, yet the scribes who kept Pharaoh Khufu's tallies called them an army. All the same, an army of builders marshaled by schedule, rather than spear, by quarried timetables rather than shields. Thousands threaded the dusted lanes, quarrymen with shoulders brushed white from powder, masons carrying limestone mallets, smooth as water-worn shells, haulers, bakers, basket weavers, water pourers, and the shy young goatherds who minded bleating flocks on the village margin. They were farmers from the delta released from plowshares while the inundations swelled their fields, craftsmen from Memphis seeking royal favor, conscripted crews from Upper Egypt, whose sun-darkened feet knew every bend of the river. Some came by decree, some by hope, yet all moved in rhythmic rotation. 3 months on the plateau, 9 months in home provinces, the cycle turning as predictably as the Nile's rise. Down slope from the plateau's pale geometry, Kafr el-Gabel, unfurled like a woven mat of mud brick walls and shaded courtyards. The houses stood squat and inward-facing, their windowless exteriors shielding cool interiors from the day's fierce glare. Within, reed mats, muffled footfalls, ceramic jars exhaled the earthy perfume of stored grain, and modest hearths nursed embers for lentil stew. At dawn, The scent of barley loaves leavened the corridors. At dusk, smoke of tamarisk wood drifted toward the plateau, mingling with the distant clink of copper tools. Families shared narrow sleeping niches laid with palm fiberding. On summer nights, the men rolled their mats onto flat roofs to lie beneath star patterns that mirrored the pyramid's short triangles. Daily fare, though plain, was planned with deliberate care. Scribes recorded mountains of onions, leeks, and garlic carted in reed baskets, figs, dates, and sycamore fruit, sweetened open platters. Fish, dried in slabs of salt, cattle, sheep, and occasional gazelle, strode into slaughter yards in a haze of dust and bellow. Yet the true heartbeat of sustenance beat within clay jars of cloudy gold beer, nourishing as bread. 4 to 5 jars formed the ration for an adult laborer each day, thick with grain and still lively with yeast, more porridge than potion, easing both thirst and hunger. Higher rations flowed toward the skilled artificers in the stone yards, for their craft demanded steady concentration, and Pharaoh paid for such precision in extra cups of frothy brew. Along the village's sun-baked edge, communal bakeries rang with the soft percussion of kneading palms. Loaves shaped like small domes were slid into clay ovens still warm from last night's embers. The fragrance of roasting barley drifted through open archways and over sleeping infants. Nearby, long fermentation vats murmured gently, bubbles rising through the amber grain wash like slow beads of desert spring water. Overseers, reed pens tucked behind ears, paced between ovens and vats, ticking tallies on ostracon shards, ensuring the measure met the mandate. The rhythm of grain to loaf, emmer to beer, man to pyramid unfolded with coaxing accuracy the kingdom's colossal dream depending, first, on breakfast. Yet the hum of labor was not without laughter. Evidence lies in strokes of red ochre scribbled upon half-dressed walls, casual caricatures of foremen with bellies round as wine, skins, snatches of song lyrics, playful boasts of gang loyalty. On the limestone blocks of the Great Pyramid itself, hidden from final outer layers, gangs branded their passages with proud tags: friends of Khufu, the drunkards of Menkaure, the vigorous ones of the White Crown. These modest graffiti, veiled for millennia inside the core, carry the timbre of unguarded voices, the pulse of ordinary camaraderie moving through an extraordinary task. Their names surface also within little tombs carved south of the Pyramid Plateau. Unlike grand mastebas of noblemen, these resting places were modest, yet their lime-plaster walls bore hieroglyphs of remarkable tenderness. Seshat Hotep, scribe of the grain crews, lies beneath a painted ceiling speckled with 5-pointed stars. Beside him, gently incised in ink, a small inventory of loaves remains eternally allotted to his ka. Farther west rests Katie, overseer of whole teams, his false door framed by a low relief of oxen straining against sledges work he once directed, now commemorated in stone softer than memory. Small offerings of beer jars, still ringed and faded blue, stood at their feet until excavators lifted them into morning light anew. The human record extends deeper, written into bone, in silent rows across the slope. Archaeologists found skeletons that whispered of strain, yet also of healing. Compressed vertebrae traced the weight of stone, arthritic knees mirrored days spent on uneven ramps, and fractured arms had mended straight, suggesting the patient lay long enough for calcium's slow masonry to set. One skull revealed a neat, rectangular opening trepanation edge, smoothed by new growth, hinting at physicians who understood not merely pulse and poultice but the resilience of living mind. Eased fevered aches, 2 ivory splints bound with plant fiber brace, a child's delicate tibia even now, testament to caretakers who folded tenderness into the royal project's stern demands. Medical shelters clustered just beyond the artisans' workshops. Simple awnings of woven flax cast patient beds into shade, and water bearers tipped fresh jars over palm wood basins where sand was rinsed from open cuts. While the king's court physicians occasionally rode forth in gilded litters, the daily craft of care belonged to local healers, men and women, conversant in herbs that thrived along canal banks, chamomile to calm restless stomachs, coriander seeds chewed to sweeten breath, aloe rubbed cool against burned skin. When the evening breeze rose, murmured spells accompanied salves, for words too were medicine, braided into the patient's own breath until pain loosened its grip. Behind the easy cadence of houses and hospitals, an invisible grid of organization governed the tide of labor. At the plateau's base stood a low hall lined with wooden tablets. Every moon cycle, runners arrived with new lists, scripted in black and red ink, rotations drawn from the provinces, quotas of limestone, schedules for copper chisel sharpening, even the number of palm ropes due for testing. Overseers of 10, suspended foremen of 50, chiefs of 500 titles, stepped upward in crisp hierarchy, rising like the courses of granite above them. Arrayed across this living bureaucracy, the builder army split into crews named after deities and royal epithets. 20 men to a crew, 40 crews to a file. 2 files rotating on and off the plateau, each lunar month. When one file marched down toward ferry boats, their calloused shoulders bronzed from weeks beneath the sun. Another ascended singing fresh, their sandals still carrying the scent of silt from distant floodplains. Water carriers walked the beaten track at set intervals, sprinkling the ramp surfaces to cut the grit that might grind ropes. Taskmasters signaled shifts with short bars of polished wood tapped against stone, a sound both light and clear, hardly more than the click of a heron's bill. In such understated rhythms, the pyramid rose, block upon block, schedule upon schedule, each stone set inside a matrix of measured hours. And when dusk spilled lilac across the ridge, clerks in lantern-lit nooks recorded the day's tally, tying progress to parchment as securely as masons tied blocks with gravity. Yet, far from mechanized monotony, the builders perceived meaning in the monument they lifted. The pyramid was regarded as a rising landform, echo of the primeval mound surfacing from watery nothingness. To place one limestone block was to repeat creation's first gesture. Such symbolism lent hush to certain moments. When a gang paused to watch the horizon ignite with copper dawn, or when a master setter guided the pyramidion of coarse limestone into throne above yesterday's courses, in those breaths, sweat mingled with something near to reverence. They were mortals shaping a ladder not only for Khufu's spirit, but for the cosmos to remember their hands. The village breathed in long pulses of season and ceremony. Festival days released workers to watch priests in bright linen process with incense and clattering sistra. Songs rolled across the plateau as flocks of red-crowned cranes tilted in thermals overhead. At night, flickering lamplight played against house walls where children traced their fingers over chalk sketches of boats, falcons, or great triangles that pointed to constellations just beginning to shimmer. And through it all, the omnipresent hum of management slid smoothly beneath the melody of daily life. Supply barges timed to the river's fall, copper mines in Sinai feeding ingots to Kefren's foundries, scribes toggling rosters on papyrus scrolls, so that no gang lost a single sunrise to confusion. The project's scale was as grand in paper calculus as in stone, a monument of mathematics, of logistics, of flesh and thought entwined. Yet, viewed under the quiet lens of night, it distilled to smaller images. An aging quarryman massaging resin into cracked palms, a girl ferrying a covered jar of soup to her father on the north ramp, a physician whispering soft petitions to Sekhmet while changing a bandage glowing with beeswax. Now, as lanterns dim within Khufu, El Gibel, and the hush returns to courtyards, the pyramid stands above the village roofs in moon-silvered silence, guardian of dreams for those who gave it form. Its shadow rolls gently over sleeping doorways, passing like a cool tide until dawn will draw the army to its flanks again. Before that dawn arrives, another chapter stirs beyond this one, an exploration of the methods that slid heavy blocks ever higher, of ramps curled like sandstone serpents and levers long as tamarisk trunks. Those quiet mechanics wait in the wings, ready to unfold in smooth, deliberate strokes, just as the stars keep their patient vigil above the plateau, charting time until the next slow turning of the tale. As the desert evening cooled and the last golden blocks settled into quiet expectation, the narrative drifted from the drama of quarry dust and rolling sledges toward the subtler tasks that precede any ascent. The plateau itself, a broad shoulder of pale bedrock overlooking the slow river, now weighted like a blank papyrus sheet. Before a single tear could climb toward morning sun, invisible lines had to be traced across that living stone, lines so true that centuries would scarcely be able to find the error. In this hush, the planners gathered, coaxing geometry from wind, starlight, and the patient ground. They carried no gleaming theodolites, no humming instruments of brass and glass, only slender staffs of wood, knotted ropes of flax, plumb bobs cut from copper, and the knowledge of the sky held in their quiet minds. A simple mercat, cradle for a stretched cord and a hanging weight, was lifted against the backdrop of early dusk. Beside it, the palm rib sighting bar, called bay, drew a straight horizon within the eye. When the two were placed in tandem, heaven and earth met in a portable observatory, light enough for a single surveyor to cradle, heavy enough in meaning to shape a mountain of stone. Night after night they watched the turning vault, choosing the stillest hours when the distant shallows of the river lay mirror smooth and camel bells no longer rang. They fixed upon circumpolar stars, those that never set, describing a silent circle around the unmarked point of true north. Each transit of Kokab and Mazar across an imaginary vertical line teased that hidden pole into sharper clarity. Cords were stretched, stakes tapped, charcoal marks flicked upon limestone chips. When dawn swept color back into the plain, a faint north-south axis shone in dusty charcoal, laid down with a margin of error finer than a child's fingernail. Yet alignment was only the first stanza in their quiet poem. The base must be not merely square to the cardinal points, but level as the time-worn sea. For this they turned from sky to water, carving shallow trenches along the perimeter of the intended foundation. Into these channels the Nile, through patient leather buckets, was invited to rest. Liquid threaded the outline like silken ribbon, finding its own horizon, refusing to pretend. When the water's edge kissed each limestone lip with identical height, Mason scored a reference line, then drained the trenches, leaving on stone a ghost of the river's absolute equilibrium. Across that tempered surface, a square was drawn whose sides measured just over 230 sacred cubits, each corner set within a socket carved a little deeper than the field around it. The sockets, subtle pockets in bedrock, received the first course of casing stones like fingertips cupped around a jewel. They safeguarded the outline and anchored the angular momentum of the rising mass. Only when modern surveyors crawled across those depressions with tapes and total stations did the purpose of the recessed corners fully unfold, revealing a corrective flourish worthy of an artisan's final brushstroke on wet plaster. In the same breath of revelation came the story of the faces, ever so slightly concave. To an eye untrained, the pyramid appears as four planes meeting in crisp arrest lines, yet each facade retreats inward by a scant finger's breadth, a whisper of an arc that compensates for optical illusion and structural stress alike. Mason after mason, course after ascending course, obeyed this curvature as faithfully as larks follow the dawn breeze, coaxed not by written plans, but by wooden gauges passed along the scaffolds. The result is not overt, yet sunshine at equinox briefly paints the double shadow that tells of their discretion. All of these subtleties, once the preserve of sand-softened rumor, have in recent generations been traced with beams of coherent light. Engineers unpacked laser scanners beneath metallic tripods, their devices humming like distant cicadas while crimson dots skated over weathered limestone. Each return pulse wrote a coordinate into electronic memory, and by dawn billions of points floated in spectral space, a crystalline ghost of the pyramid hovering within computer screens. From that ghost, statistics whispered, the sides diverge from true north by mere minutes of arc. The baseline departs from flatness by only a handful of millimeters. The concavity measures precisely as old writings hinted. Among the engineers, a quiet astonishment took hold, for each calculation returned not anomaly but agreement. They compared notes under muted tent light, realizing that the ancient grid could serve as calibration for their own machinery, not the reverse. In that moment, millennia collapsed, like sand walls in rain, and the word progress softened. Skill had never been a straight arrow forward. It was a circle drawn around wonder, closing gently upon itself. So the rivalry between old stone and new silicon ended not in triumph, but in gentle handshake. The glowing lattices of data bowed to the chisel's memory, confirming that the ancient architects, with their plumb lines poised beneath constellations and their water-filled grooves shimmering beneath oil lamps, had approached perfection to a degree that modern code could scarcely improve. What remained for contemporary eyes was not superiority, but wonder, a realization that intention, when steady and patient, can lend to simple tools a precision that outlives empires and eclipses. The plateau kept its silence, yet beneath that hush a smile seemed to press against the earth. In the soft sand outside the leveled square, the survey stakes were left to weather, their shadows shortening with each passing noon, until only the story of their once-taut chords lingered. Children of laborers would sometimes tug at the frayed rope ends, hearing from elders how the lines had echoed the very turn of the skies. Nearby, the quarry masters inspected sled tracks, testing that the approach ramps aligned with the newly ordained corners. Even the river's slow meander was measured against the base, for barges would soon ferry bright Tura limestone that must slide, unjolted, onto prepared causeways. Yet for the moment, no stone shifted, no hammer rang. The great outline lay exposed to sky like a sleeping giant, its limbs traced but its body unformed. Wind combed across the plateau, lifting flower-fine grains that settled in the grooves of the corner sockets, outlining them in pale ochre. Above, the sun marched from east to west, precisely along the track the builders had anticipated, its passage validating their geometry with every elongated morning beam. From a distance, a traveler might read the grid as a curious fence of low stone, never guessing it was the footprint of a horizon-chasing peak. By twilight, lamps were lit in the planning tent, their flames sheltered behind parchment-thin alabaster. Overseers unfolded papyri covered in red and black ink, verifying again the reading of the stars and the testimony of the water. They spoke in low phrases, like monks parsing melody, agreeing that the base was ready to invite its first layer. A scribe recorded the measured length of each side to the fraction of a digit, then sealed the roll with moist clay, imprinting the seal of Khufu, shaper of the king's vision. Outside, jackals padded silently past, indifferent to mathematics yet guided by the same moon. Beyond the tent, the plateau fell into gradual darkness, yet the north-south axis continued its dialogue with the heavens. Polaris was still many millennia away from taking the throne. The vacant polar void pressed against the blackness like a question, and once more Kokab swung across the meridian, confirming what the Merket had already set in stone. Somewhere downstream reeds rustled, and an owl launched, its wings describing the same perfect plane that the builders so patiently sought. Harmony echoed across scales, from the feather's quiet arc to the horizon of granite blocks yet to be birthed. The plan was now a presence, intangible, yet undeniable. Like a melody remembered, even when the singer slips away. Not a single course had been laid, yet the pyramid existed in potential, its coordinates etched into earth and memory together. Years later, when sandstone temples eroded and dynasties blurred, the stone mountain would still hold that first night of measurement within its body, every casing block a crystallized note from the starlit survey. To regard the edifice without knowing this overture would be to hear a symphony from its second movement, unaware of the tuning that made all later harmonies possible. Tomorrow, with dawn's earliest blush, sledges will groan softly under the weight of the inaugural stones, and the level base will welcome its bright burden. Ramps of rubble and clay, mapped by the same chords that once measured constellations, stand ready to guide each block to its allotted niche. The pyramid's heart, still invisible, begins to beat in cautious anticipation. For now, night settles over Khufu's chosen hill, wrapping the perfect square in whispering sand. Somewhere within that darkness, a mason fingers a polished mole, feeling in its smooth handle the promise of height yet to come, a promise our tale will gently unfurl. A pale ribbon of dawn still lingers over the eastern quarry, where the previous chapter closed, its chalky glow glancing off unfinished limestone faces and the faint ruts of sled runners drying in the sand. As the morning hush settles, attention drifts from the quarry's hush to the grand geometry slowly unfolding on the plateau, a half-grown pyramid whose masonry courses already ladder toward the sky, awaiting ingenious methods of ascent. The first notion to shimmer into focus is the most straightforward, an immense rectilinear ramp nudging up from desert floor to rising summit. In soft imagination, the ramp appears as a smooth, gently inclined causeway of compacted taffla clay, wider than a river at its base and narrowing as it climbs. Teams of workers, shaded by linen kerchiefs, led wooden sledges up the earthen tongue. With each rhythmic tug, ropes tighten, sled bows creak, and a fresh block, whitened by gypsum slurry, inches forward. Yet the mind soon weighs the price of such simplicity. The ramp must lengthen as the pyramid towers, devouring colossal volumes of fill, swallowing precious labor, and hiding the very facade it seeks to serve. The image fades like a sand drawing in wind, making room for subtler conjecture. Next drifts the idea of a zigzagging ascent, embracing the monument on two contiguous flanks. This serpentine path unfurls in staggered terraces. A slope climbs 20 cubits, levels into a platform, then doubles back, reversing direction while climbing anew. When viewed from a distance, the ramp's silhouette would mirror the lull of a gentle sine wave, touching alternate corners like a ribbon laid upon a jewel box. Workers, pulling in unison, negotiate shorter stretches, pause at each landing for rest and realignment, then continue toward higher courses. The layout economizes earthen fill and leaves, at least two sides of the pyramid visible, preserving the ceremonial spectacle of white limestone gradually coating the sunlit faces. Still, each turn of the ramp demands careful carpentry-edge beams, retaining walls, anchoring stakes so that the structure neither crumbles under weight nor bows outward when the summer clay dries and shrinks. Emerging through the shimmering air comes a still more discreet proposal, an internal spiral concealed just inside the pyramid's outer shell. Within the ascending masonry, a hollow corridor would snake upward like a corkscrew carved in stone, wide enough for sledges found only in imagination, and lit by chinks intentionally left in the outer layers. In this vision, the polished surface could advance undisturbed from foundation to pinnacle. Outside onlookers would watch a perfect pyramid rise while the hidden artery delivered payload after payload to the upper tiers. With each new course, masons would close the corridor beneath them, entombing the curving gallery forever in cool darkness. Ghost-quiet footfalls echo inside these unseen ramps, and torches sputter low, their smoke slipping between blocks to bleed invisibly into the desert wind. However the ramps turn straight, zigzag, or spiraled, gravity's verdict remains constant. Each limestone block tips the scale at roughly 2.5 metric tons, a silent weight that scorns haste. To coax such mass upward, crews rely on the ancient trinity of sled, rope, and water. In gentle sequence, the wooden runners are coated with a thin glaze of desert silt, mixed into a slick mud. Bucket bearers ladle water onto the track just ahead of each pull, reducing friction by nearly half. Modern physics, resting on the shoulders of Newton, whispers behind the scene. A coefficient of kinetic friction lowered from 0.5 to 0.25 means a horizontal force of some 5,000 newtons rather than 10. Ropes, plated of papyrus and palm fiber, stretch yet hold. Their fibers tighten when wet, preventing sudden jolts that might split the sled or fracture stone corners. Sometimes, where ramps steepen or space constricts, levering replaces hauling. A block is nudged forward onto a fulcrum beam. Long wooden levers pivot downward, and the stone rises a fraction, just enough to slide a ballast, pebble, or a sliver of timber beneath. The levers reset, and the process repeats, patient as dusk, until the block achieves a new level. The quiet click of limestone kissing cedar echoes like the muted tick of an hourglass. Lever teams work in alternating squads. One group heaves while another rests, breathing in cycles that parallel the rise and fall of gongs, unheard, yet sensed in every measured motion. All labors converge under the banner of shared rhythm. Overseers set the cadence with clapsticks, though the sound never jars. It melts into the desert's murmuring wind. Pullers lean backward in rows, heels digging troughs that tomorrow's sand will fill, torsos rocking as one living rope. Torchbearers time their steps, ensuring no stray flame licks the hemp lines. Masons, crouched on upper courses, guide incoming blocks with murmured signals and gentle taps of gypsum-plastered mallets, while surveyors check alignments by string and plumb bob, eyeing the glint of midday sunlight that runs arrow-straight along an edge if the work remains true. In such carefully braided effort, each task supports the next. Even the humblest water carrier becomes an essential gear in a wide, whispering machine. Yet no ascent is flawless. Mid-build, an early straight ramp in one scholarly reconstruction surrenders to a sudden slump. Perhaps torrential winter rain burrows gullies beneath its flanks. Perhaps the weight of newly laid granite from the king's chamber pinches the ramp's outer wall until it shears away. The collapse is not explosive, rather earth-size. Clay bulges, and a section slouches into a broad, silent scar. Work pauses. Engineers experts in a discipline still unnamed pace, the perimeter, sandals sinking into debris, palms tasting grit as they test the damp soil. Decisions are slow but certain. The damaged portion is sliced off. The angle gentled, buttressing courses of limestone scrap are keyed into the ramp's heart, and crews return like tidewater, filling the planed surface with new, better-bound material. From setback is born refinement. The modified ramp now curves, modestly, to share its load across a broader base. Over months, the misfortune fades beneath fresh layers, leaving only a subtle kink in archaeological sediment for modern minds to ponder. In a separate epoch of the build, recorded solely in conjectured CGI, the spiral corridor meets its own crisis. A misaligned turn, 2 cubits too narrow, prevents the largest chamber lintel from swinging upward. Digital dust motes float through the simulated passage as contemporary modelers run their algorithms. The virtual overseer orders a stone nibbed away, the inner edge chamfered, and a temporary platform erected to lift the lintel high enough to pivot. The correction succeeds, yet the simulation keeps the memory and educational echo of the choices ancient architects would have weighed within torchlit walls. The present narrative drifts now to a gentle, wide-angle panorama rendered by modern artists. In patient sequence, the pyramid assembles on screen, foundation leveled to the whisper of bubble within water trench. First course laid like a white collar on an empty throat, height climbing as ramps wrap, unwrap, and at last fall away. Each stage dissolves into the next with slow fades, the color palette soft as milkstone, the music no more than the suggestion of reed pipes on a riverbank. Viewers, though unseen, might feel the structure's mass and method, yet nothing startles. The edits breathe like evening air through open shutters. By the closing frames, the pyramid stands unfinished but formidable, its summit still a flattened construction deck awaiting final blocks. The ramps, whether earthen, wooden, or hidden, linger in partial form, some actively in use, others already being dismantled for fill elsewhere on the site. Deliberate progress below. Night begins to violet the western horizon, and the tale prepares to lean toward deeper chambers. In the next chapter, attention will glide inward. Following flickering lamplight, down narrow passages to explore the silent enigma of internal voids and the mysteries they guard. The desert wind softens, cradling the plateau in a hush, both ancient and ongoing, as the half-built pyramid dreams of the completeness still to come. Twilight still lingers over the plateau where desert sands once drifted through the ramps of our tale. A faint memory of Chapter 6 quarries hushed, blocks gliding, copper tools, singing their slow metallic lullaby echoes like the final note of a distant flute. Out of that mellow aftersound the camera glides inward, surrendering daylight for stone shadow, and the Great Pyramid unfolds not as a mountain anymore, but as a world within itself. In the first long corridor, night settles differently. The descending passage narrows, the ceiling pushes close, and each footfall of imagination feels cushioned by 4.5 millennia of silence. Soon the slope straightens, then swells upward into the grand gallery, a hall so steep and tall it seems to breathe, though breathing stone makes no sound. 7 cobbled steps on either wall rise like muscular ribs, holding one upon another in graduated ledges. Pale limestone flecks capture the last gold of evening, turning it into a muted ember. Scholars of mechanism imagine this gallery as the beating heart of a machine, a counterweight system that once heaved granite plugs, sealed secret corridors, maybe even elevated the pharaoh's sarcophagus along an invisible rail. Whether or not gears truly turned here, the geometry itself hints at purpose. Every sloping plane, every notched groove, waits with patient tension, as if still prepared for some unseen load to roll upward toward eternal equilibrium. Below that vaulted stairway, the Queen's chamber rests in the mid-body of the monument, delicate in proportion, almost shy after the serpent spine of the grand gallery. Its gabled roof meets in the gentlest of angles, and the floor, laid from single limestone slabs, yields a cool, quiet, fragrant with mineral earth. The name Queen's Chamber is a kindness from later pilgrims. No ancient inscription calls it so. Egyptologists debate its destiny. A serdab for the royal car to inhabit, a transitional womb where Khufu's soul might rehearse rebirth before ascending higher. Or perhaps a pragmatic decoy, confounding thieves with an empty gift while the true sarcophagus waited farther above. The stone niche in the eastern wall, almost human in height, deepens the mystery. In the hush one might believe it is both at once, a place where sound became spirit. Running from that chamber through 30 meters of masonry are 2 slender corridors no wider than a swallow's wings. Their angles, close to the gallery's own slope, pierce upward toward outer air. Long called air shafts, they once seemed the simplest of utilities, thence to ferry fresh desert wind into the pyramid's lung. Yet their dimensions deny easy functionality. Each begins as a straight, square-cut tube, then bends with geometric grace, negotiating blocks that weigh more than cottages. Workers would have sculpted their bends blind, guided by plumb lines, copper chisels, and the low drum of pounding dolerite. The resulting perfection, hardly a finger's breadth out of true, has led modern minds toward ritual rather than respiration. Ancient harbors of rebirth. If the pharaoh's soul were a bird of light, these were the flight corridors. Above, in the king's chamber, the granite changes the music entirely. Where lower rooms glow creamy white, this sanctuary brims with the heavy dusk of Aswan's red stone. The blocks, 9 meters long, deliver a gravity that feels almost planetary, as though a mountain core were invited to inhabit the pyramid's summit. Here stands the single surviving piece of royal furniture, A lidless sarcophagus, also granite, its interior edges softened by the touch of those who first opened it, centuries after Khufu's reign. No gold, no body, no spell-carved cartoucheries remains, yet the emptiness itself shines deeper than treasure. Engineers study the chamber as a marvel of stress distribution. 5 relieving spaces, each layered with massive granite beams, float above like hidden attics, converting the pyramid's weight into silent balance. Others listen instead to the whispers of proportion. The room's length, width, and height hold integer ratios that echo harmonic chords, perhaps encouraging chants to reverberate in soothing resonance, persuading the departed king that order endures. Even these measured marvels did not exhaust the pyramid's capacity for secrecy. In our own century, particle physicists brought muon detectors into the bowels of the structure, letting cosmic messengers reveal what human eyes could not. Their charts blossomed with an unexpected silhouette, a void broad as an airliner, long as a cathedral hovering above the grand gallery, unreachable by known passages, untroubled by time's rubble. It is neither the queen's chamber nor the king's, but something in between, like a breath drawn and never released. Maps, sealed before history could awaken, yet perhaps its function was simpler. A cavity to lighten the structure, much as a sculptor hollows bronze to keep form from collapsing under its own substance. The void waits, indifferent to fascination, its darkness perfectly folded. The entire internal design, from descending passage to secret attic, can be read as a diagram of existence. At the pyramid's base, the unfinished subterranean chamber, rough-hewn and chaotic, parallels birth in raw earth. Above, the queen's chamber suggests maturation, breath, the hush before ascent. Higher still, the king's chamber embodies culmination, death reimagined as coronation among stars. The shafts, like diagonal strokes through stone parchment, guide the eye and the soul outward toward northern permanence and southern renewal. Even the alignment of passages north-south mirrors for day and night. East-west echoes of sunrise and sunset turns the pyramid into a frozen dialogue between worlds visible and unseen. Observers standing at different altitudes inside might sense themselves moving not upward through architecture, but inward through states of being. Thus, the Grand Gallery, so often compared to the throat of a mechanical beast, performs double duty. In function, it might have housed sliding trolleys or lifted granite plugs with ropes thick as serpents. In feeling, it is a canyon of anticipation. The very act of stepping upward along its ramp evokes initiation, a journey from compressed entry to triumphant clearance, where the vault broadens to stars, glimpsed through shafts. For workmen, it was a workplace and scaffold. For priests, a corridor of consecration. For stone itself, perhaps only an articulation in its long repose. Debates over purpose, though ardent, change nothing in the patient sands. Whether ventilation channels moderated flame-lit torches or stellar tunnels framed Orion at midnight, whether the queen's chamber sheltered a granite statue or a living ritual, whether the void is accident, burden release, or crypt of forgotten rites, these conversations circle like migrating birds, return each season and depart again. The pyramid's genius is to welcome all theories, then outlast them. It teaches that certainty is transient, but wonder endures. Outside, moonlight now strokes the pyramid's northern face. The outer casing stones that once gleamed like snowy cliffs have mostly fallen away, revealing the rugged core we explore tonight. Yet their memory remains. A luminous skin that would have mirrored dusk and dawn, turning geometry into brilliance. To picture that vanished sheen while standing inside the gritty heart of masonry is to feel two worlds overlapping. The finished perfection offered to the heavens, and the raw engineering that made perfection possible. Far below, the plateau cools, desert foxes pad through shadow, faint wind brushes acacia thorns. Within, Granite holds its stored day heat, exhaling warmth so slowly it seems to breathe backwards. Those relieving chambers above the king's chamber, stacked like secret stories, share that warmth with the weightless void. Invisible muons continue their quiet reign, painting outlines we may someday decode fully, though perhaps not. The pyramid is in no hurry for revelation. As night deepens, the narrative prepares to drift outward again. The passageways shrink back into their own stillness, as though conscious thought were gently closing eyelids of stone. Beyond these narrowing corridors lies another tale. The gleaming outer mantle, the capstone's lost gold, the pyramid's dialogue with sun and shadow across the valley. That luminous conversation awaits in the next chapter, unveiled with the slow serenity that only dawn can provide. As the hush of the inner chambers settled like desert dusk, thought drifted outward, rising slowly through shafts of shadow to the skin of Khufu's pyramid, where stone once shimmered beneath patient skies. No clang of tool, no footfall, remained only the memory of an immaculate casement that once caught the newborn sun and scattered it across the plateau in quiet reverberations of gold-white light. Fashioned from Tura's fine limestone, each face had been planed to a silk-smooth finish, edges married with mathematical grace until even air hesitated to slip between. In that distant age, the monument did not merely rise. It glowed, an enormous pale flame frozen against cobalt mornings and rose-gray evenings. Travelers approaching from the marsh-lined river found their gaze pulled upward, as though the pyramid were less a mountain of masonry than a luminous thought, hovering just beyond the reachable world. Such brilliance lingered within collective memory. In the imagination of architects, the casing blocks were not merely cladding but living surfaces breathing geometry. Quarrymen at Tura had opened gleaming corridors in the hillside, releasing chalk-bright veins destined for Giza. Slabs slid on sledge and barge, their whiteness wrapped to guard against chipping, like precious fabric guarding moonlight. On arrival, teams of masons shaved the undersides until each stone rested on the next with hairline precision, exploiting the limestone's buttery temperament. Lime wash, rubbed into microscopic pores, sealed joints so seamlessly that morning light flowed across the faces as though poured from an invisible amphora. When midday height arrived, the pyramid blazed unbearably bright. Sailors steering the royal barges steered by its reflection, and priests spoke of a stairway carved from condensed radiance. Yet in the silent mathematics guiding every block, there was humility too, an acceptance that light would always travel farther than stone into eternity. Above this ocean of whiteness once perched a smaller miracle, the Pyramid, sheathed in gilded copper that mirrored dawn before the rim of sun itself appeared. Legends whispered that Ra settled there each night to await rebirth, and that first contact between sunlight and metal released a silent hymn that rippled through every chamber below. Artisans had hammered the capstone skin until it could receive a passing cloud as cleanly as a still pool. Yet the structure beneath remained limestone, keyed carefully to the courses beneath, so that weight distributed like slow water rather than sharpened force. In mourning ceremonies, priests traced invisible lines from capstone to horizon, measuring the gods' approval in glints and gleams. For a brief breath each day, no sculpted statue exceeded that gleam in sanctity. Gold and sun became indistinguishable, and stone, for all its gravity, seemed to forget it was not light at all. Time, however, possesses gentler, yet more persistent chisels. Seasons combed the plateau with wind that tasted of distant seas, and grain by grain the flawless sheen grew grainier, like curl turned into coarse chalk beneath unseen fingers. Then came darker tremors, deep within the earth. Folds in the crust sighed and shifted, transmitting shudders that sprinted upward through bedrock. Cairo, already stretching along the riverbank, felt these quakes as uneasy rattles of lamps and walls. Khufu's pyramid absorbed them as minute rearrangements, joints loosening with almost imperceptible sighs. In 1303, when a stronger tremor coursed below Giza, casing stones from the northeast edge cracked and fell, sliding in slow cascades that ended in broken terraces near the base. Where breaches appeared, opportunistic daylight entered, revealing a rougher core the ancients never meant for eyes. Within a few generations, the dream of a universal mirror had begun its long, reluctant departure. Human need hastened the unraveling. Medieval builders, charged with raising mosques, fortifications, and palaces for a bustling capital, saw in the fallen casing a quarry already cut and shaped. Mamluk emirs dispatched crews armed with iron levers. Capstans squealed quietly as stones slid down improvised ramps toward the river. Some blocks entered the citadel, others settled into Cairo's grand souks, their polished faces turning inward to cloak prayer niches or city gates. Every migration carried a faint echo of the pyramid's first purpose. Yet on new walls that echoed dimmed beneath plaster, paint, and time, the gilded pyramidion, long destabilized by theft and weather, vanished entirely, perhaps broken for bullion, perhaps buried beneath later debris, leaving the summit blunt and pale, a plateau where swifts now ride thermals. The monument endured, but its cloak of light took residence in thousands of quiet courtyards far downstream, each stone holding silence like stored starlight. Those who approach today confront the scarred geometry of survival. The lower tiers reveal uneven scars where quarrying ended, while higher slopes retain scattered bands of the original casing, anonymous islands of smooth chalk set amid rugged limestone sea. On certain afternoons, when dust thins and sun angles low, these remnant patches still blush pearl, hinting at the lost wholeness the mind reconstructs instinctively. Above them, the amputated apex points not to a gleaming cap, but to an unwritten idea. A promise suspended between memory and imagination. Scholars pace the perimeter, notebooks open, measuring seams that once defied measurement. Tourists rest hands on broad cores built for permanence, unaware that their fingertips hover inches from vanished marble. The contrast between what remains and what is remembered invites a gentle melancholy, yet also a quiet gratitude. Without dissolution, one might never glimpse the architecture of impermanence embedded within the eternal stone narrative. Debate circulates softly among conservators. Some argue that restoration should return missing casing to at least one corner, a luminous sample stitched to weathered flanks, so future eyes may catch a fraction of original majesty. Others counsel restraint, wary of disguising history's honest abrasion. The pyramid, they contend, speaks now with a voice layered by eras. To overlay a modern sheen would silence centuries of adaptation. Any intervention must negotiate not only engineering but ethics, which quarry could provide stone of equal grain without erasing another landscape, which mortar, however clever, would age in harmony rather than assert itself in bright seams. There is consideration, too, of celestial intent. To restore only ground-level blocks might please terrestrial sightlines, yet ignore the skybound dialogue once brokered by the pyramidion. Thus conferences unfold beneath shaded awnings while the monument waits, unhurried, accustomed to decisions measured in agreement, and sands drift in agreement. Meanwhile, scientists coax information from the surviving stones. Ground-penetrating radar traces hidden cavities where casing once interlocked. Spectrographs read faint residues of ancient plaster, revealing trade routes for pigments and salts. Microscopic fossils embedded in limestone proclaim the vanished seas that birthed these rocks millions of years before Khufu dreamed of them. Every sample, however small, escorts perception further outward in time, connecting modern labs to primal oceans and then back to the pyramid's luminous youth. Yet empirical data alone cannot resurrect the sensation of standing before the fully clothed monument at sunrise. That living vision belongs to imagination, fed by numbers but not confined by them, unfolding like a private dawn behind closed lids. Thus, scholarship and reverie collaborate. stitching threads between stone facts and light's forgotten shoal, ensuring that the pyramid continues to exist not only in gravity and measure, but also in the pliant hush of wonder. Night descends, and the remnant casing reflects a subtler illumination, gathering moonlight in patches that resemble lingering snow on a weathered ridge. Jackals sometimes weave between the stones, their paws silent, eyes catching silver sparks where humans once raised torches. High above, the place where the Pyramidion once gleamed now frames constellations. Orion drifts precisely where gilded copper used to flare, continuing an ancient conversation between architecture and sky. Within these hours, the debate over restoration falls quiet, replaced by wind that hums through breached joints, tuning the structure like an enormous Aeolian harp. Each note is soft, almost imagined, yet carries across the plateau with patient resolve, reminding anyone listening that wholeness can be expressed in countless registers. The pyramid, clothed or unclothed, still conducts light, shadow, and sound toward a single calm center, the axis around which centuries turn like drifting sand, settling into the desert's unspoken repose. Toward dawn, pale gold begins its slow return along the eastern rim, and faint color brushes the surviving casing, sketching the briefest reminder of the pyramid's vanished cloak. The stone receives this kindness without longing, as though understanding that every form of brilliance is temporary, yet perpetually exchangeable. Soon, shafts of light will once again penetrate the entrance passages, crawling inch by inch toward the grand gallery where silence gathers like clear water in a hidden pool. There, angles and voids will conspire, a new guiding luminosity inward just as surely as outer faces once vomit outward. The monument's dialogue with light, though changed, is unbroken, and in the chambers within, geometry still awaits its daily visitation. Beyond these quiet observations lies another story, the secret arithmetic of weight, alignment, and cosmic measure inscribed in corridors and shafts waiting patient as sandstone for the chapter that will explore their invisible harmonies soon. When the glow of the previous reverie fades, where moonlight silvered the giant's marble memory and left it shimmering with stories half-spoken, the scene drifts outward, widening like a slow exhalation over the centuries. The Great Pyramid, tranquil in midnight indigo, rests beneath patterns of ancient starlight. And with that hush, the procession of its visitors begins. Time itself ambles through the desert corridor, leading a silent caravan of scholars, plunderers, pilgrims, and dreamers who, one by one, lay their questions at Khufu's monumental door. First comes Herodotus, garbed in curiosity more than cloth, arriving in the 5th century before our era. His sandal prints touch the same sand, yet bear the weight of Greek wonder. He hears fragments of local gossip handed down by temple priests, keen to embroider truth with marvel and rights of cattle, onions, of treasure wages, of rulers moved by whim. He counts the stones with his gaze, calculates rations by guesswork, and sketches the pyramid's measure in lines destined for parchment. Though his figures will drift in accuracy, his ore remains crystalline, preserved like a beetle in amber. Around him, cloudless silence spreads, punctuated only by feathers of wind that slip between the casing blocks. The modern mind, watching from a distance, can almost taste the dryness of that breeze, carrying dust and a faint musk of resin from the plateau's still fresh mortuary cult. In another moment, the tale slips forward 6 centuries, and the Romans arrive on camel-back, led by the philosopher-wanderer Strabo. Marble statuary will echo the pyramid's profile in miniature back in imperial gardens. But here, in Giza's unfiltered vastness, Strabo's stylus slows. The stone humbles Latin rhetoric into reverent hush. He presses close to the northern face, fingers tracing a faint seam. Some say he glimpses a hidden entry, others insist the shifting sun plays mirror tricks. Regardless, the notes he carries home soften into rumor, yet the image of the grandeur fixes forever in imperial memory, prompting senators to debate eternity between sips of Falernian wine. Centuries lapse, wind panes polish the monument, and the desert wraps itself around new voices. The Arab conquest unfurls green banners across the Nile's banks, and in the early 9th century, Caliph al-Ma'mun rides forward, enticed by whispers of sealed riches. Torches flicker against the pyramid's flank as his workmen, guided by pre-Islamic legends and mathematical hunches, hammer through layers of limestone. The labor is slow, the heat of each blow swallowed by the vastness of the mass. Yet at last the stones size open to reveal passageways already empty. Copper tools long removed, treasure only in geometry. Disappointment might have followed, yet al-Ma'mun, being the patron of the House of Wisdom, quickly transforms frustration into scholarship. Diaries claim he stood in the newly accessed corridor, captivated not by lost gold but by the marvel of a human mind that could fold such precision into stone. In that dim tunnel, astronomy, engineering, and metaphysics merge, a quiet symposium lit by oil dance shadows. While sovereigns prodded the pyramid's shell, humbler feet crept stealthily around its skirts. Tomb robbers, starved by drought or driven by greed, scraped burial shafts in neighboring cemeteries, hoping for necklaces or scarabs. Legends inflated their crimes into drama. Corridors flooded with molten traps, curses scribbled in blood-red ochre, guardians shaped like winged demons. Yet the sober record, emerging from chipped ostraka and scattered bone, paints a bleaker and simpler truth. Robbers were often local farmers, indentured to the inundation's rhythm. In lean seasons, they slipped among mastaba walls, levering loose offering tables, scavenging beads to barter for bread. Their craft was hurried, hardly the grand heist of myths. More often it resembled desperate gleaning, a whisper against the broader roar of history. The pyramid itself, because of its scale and grandeur, remained mostly beyond their reach, its sealed chambers too remote. Its guardianship, though human, sufficiently firm. Thus the structure sat aloof, like an Oletic queen observing petty larceny among lesser courts. By the 19th century, the desert welcomed new instruments. Ebony cases of brass sextants opened beneath billowing pith helmets, and the pyramid's serenity endured the measured clatter of tripods. So William Flinders Petrie, lean and methodical, set his chain tapes with monk-like patience. Night after night he marked star transits above the apex and found in their slow procession a resonant harmony with the courses of stone. His notebooks, inked in lantern light, revealed a tolerance of less than the width of a thumbnail between theoretical line and physical block. In these pages, admiration matured from poetry into metrology. The monument's heart beat in decimals, and the decimals sang a lullaby of cosmic intention. Where Petrie's restraint traced subtlety, Colonel Howard Weiss thundered. 2 generations earlier, he had marched to the plateau with barrels of blasting powder, determined to force access where chisels faltered. The desert quaked as his charges erupted, frail birds scattering, horizons shuddering with dust. His methods bruised the pyramid's upper chambers, yet by naked luck he uncovered the quarry marks of King Khufu's name, preserved in red paint. In that moment, scholarship, shaken though it was, salvaged a triumph. A forgotten pharaoh spoke again through quarryman's scroll. The echoes of those explosions have long drifted away, leaving behind both scar and certainty, a reminder that knowledge sometimes stumbles through violence toward clarity. 20th century eyes turned skyward. Survey balloons floated above the plateau, cameras clacking like distant beetles. Cartographers projected the pyramid's silhouette onto vast sheets, cross-hatching dune contours and worker village traces in meticulous grayscale. By mid-century, satellites orbited, their lenses peering with cold detachment. Infrared images unveiled patterns of buried walls, faint as ghosts under sand. Archaeologists walked the outlines traced by those orbital signatures, spades touching earth where once no feature was suspected, and found storerooms, bakeries, and barracks hints of bustling life eclipsed for millennia. Even in the inner core, technology continued its gentle infiltration. Wargraphy, reading the drift of cosmic rays, charted voids with the patience of dripstone growth. Sensors waited silently in the grand gallery, measuring particle trajectories like falling snow. Eventually, they drew a negative portrait of emptiness. Above the gallery, a hidden cavity, large as a small aircraft and as silent as dawn. No ladder yet probes it. No human breath has disturbed its ancient stillness. Yet the outline alone suffices to thicken wonder, suggesting that the pyramid, though repeatedly mapped, still folds surprise within its limestone origami. Those subsidiary fields where artisans, officials, and priests dreamed of eternal proximity to the king. In the gentle scrape of trowels, bone whispers to bone, telling how overseers dined, how potters shaped bread molds, how hairdressers filed ivory pins for the palace. Wooden coffins, tenderly lifted, reveal pigments, still recalling lotus blues and Nile greens. Toes rest in linen, jaws cradle amulets. Each discovery threads personal heartbeat into the grand chronicle, reminding the present that a monument is not only an equation of stones, but also a constellation of lives. Night lingers, and modern field tents glow like muted lanterns across the plateau. Students murmur over pottery rims, while senior scholars adjust GPS beacons that tick softly in electronic pulses. Yet amid all their bustle, one truth remains. The pyramid outweighs them. Stoic, immense, and quietly amused. Its angles reflect a sky older than recorded memory. Its shadow cools the same dust that once coated Herodotus's sandals, and perhaps the hem of Caliph al-Mamun's robe. Wind, forever impartial, strokes block and notebook alike, blurring boundaries between ancient quarry song and contemporary datasheet. Reflecting on the centuries, a gentle pattern emerges. A pendulum between reverence and intrusion, between seeking treasure and seeking understanding. Myths painted robbers as villains, scholars as saviors. Reality softens those edges, revealing overlapping motives carried by fallible souls. The pyramid receives them all with indifferent majesty, allowing chisels, pens, cameras, and cosmic particles to nibble at its mystery, without devouring it. For every passage breached, another remains sealed. For every equation solved, a new measurement unsettles conclusions. Thus the pyramid nurtures inquiry by withholding finality, like a desert horizon that recedes however far the traveler walks. The narrative settles into a long, low hush, as though the desert itself inhales and holds the breath. Far beyond Orion, tilts toward the west, mirroring forgotten shafts inside the mighty core. The plateau's camps quiet, their lights dimming until only the cosmos continues its silent survey. In this unhurried darkness, the Great Pyramid slides back into silhouette, a calm geometry. Soon, dawn will gather faint gold along the stone edges, and the story will turn toward loftier contemplations, the silent language of stars, the alignments that stitch Khufu's horizon to the heavens. But for now, between the final footstep of yesterday's researcher and the first cry of tomorrow's kestrel, everything rests, poised, serene, and softly unresolved. A lingering hush still clings to the Giza Plateau, the afterglow of last chapter's desert dusk folded carefully over pale limestone blocks. Above the cooling sands, the first stars have gathered like faint embers, mirroring the time-smoothed casing stones that once caught the light of a younger sun. From that gentle twilight image, the story drifts onward, unfolding, unhurried as we consider how a single monument has continued to shape the world long after Khufu's court fell quiet. Centuries slid past, and yet the outline of the Great Pyramid remained etched on the horizon of memory. When Hellenistic builders raised their lighthouses and stoas, they borrowed its sure geometry, trusting that the same calm ratio of base to height could guide a mariner home or honor a philosopher's thought. Roman surveyors, mapping new provinces, carried copies of Egyptian manuals that described how right angles were summoned from cord and peg, and with them they laid out camps and forums, steady echoes of that older discipline. Even in distant Britannia, a veteran's villa sometimes held a mosaic triangle arranged to the proportions of the pyramid's shadow at solstice, a quiet tribute to the world's first masterclass in stone. When medieval builders knelt beneath rising cathedrals, the memory of Khufu's monument brushed their parchments. The pointed arch, reaching toward heaven, was calculated with proportions the Arabs had preserved, proportions first inferred by measuring the pyramid's slope against a desert horizon. Master masons called the diagram the sacred cut, a humble translation of something grander baked into the masonry at Giza. Across Europe, spires blossomed like stone lilies. Their lofty silhouettes rhymed with the pyramid's patient climb, each course teaching that transcendence begins in the measured laying of a single block. It was during the flowering of guilds that whispered lore crystallized into ritual. Journeymen, warming their hands around charcoal braziers, spoke of a primordial lodge, said to have met in chambers carved inside the pyramid's heart. From there grew the Freemason legend that the monument contained not merely a king's tomb, but a blueprint for ethical structure, a base of prudence, walls of temperance, a point of perfect light at the apex called truth. Whether history or hopeful myth, the tale gave stonecutters a lineage as old as civilization itself, and in candlelit halls from Lisbon to Edinburgh they toasted the absent architect, whose name had survived in Greek as Cheops. As printing presses fluttered, the pyramid entered the collective daydream of popular culture. Romantic poets called it a stone lyric, each casing block a syllable in a poem about eternity. Later, silent films framed adventurers silhouetted against its flanks, exaggerating its angles so that suspense could scale them. Comic strips, album covers, and postage stamps repeated the outline until it became a shorthand for ancient wonder, just 3 lines converging on hope. With every retelling, the shape grew more familiar than the face of one's neighbor, proving that simplicity is the truest invitation to the imagination. Where curiosity thrives, conjecture gathers like desert wind, and so conspiracy theories found eager soil. Some claimed that alien starfarers, not human hands, set the limestone in place. Others argued the monument foretold every triumph and tragedy, encoded in corridors of resonant stone. Yet the pyramid endures these fictions with quiet grace, offering a subtler marvel. It is a human achievement measurable in chisels worn smooth, in rope fibers braided from Nile reeds, in cracked palms passing each block along a living chain. That record of labor is more astonishing than any visiting spacecraft, for it reveals what communities accomplish when bound by shared purpose, stretched across generations. Modern stewardship poses challenges the ancient builders never faced. Each season brings waves of travelers, their footsteps striking delicate dust loose from joints, only vultures once disturbed. Vibrations from distant highways tremble faintly through the plateau, reminding curators that time now moves in machines as well as moons. Under the broad mandate of UNESCO, engineers and archaeologists gather like contemporary priests, reading fractures the way augurs read the sky. They weigh humidity, monitor subterranean voids, and design unobtrusive walkways so that wonder can remain accessible without being consumed. Sustainability for them means balancing reverence with resilience. Solar-powered lighting replaces floodlamps that once scorched stone. Ticket quotas thin the crowds, giving masonry a chance to rest rather than displaces the people who live in the pyramid's shadow. In safeguarding the monument, they nurture livelihoods along with limestone. What, then, does the Great Pyramid teach about human potential? It whispers that ambition need not be hurried if it is vast. The builders worked with lunar steadiness, advancing each course only when the stars confirmed the angle. They quarried locally, revered their material, and fitted joints so tight that even today a paper sheet catches on the seam. Each decision was a note in a choral plan inaudible until centuries passed, and yet it proves that patience can outlast kingdoms. It also reminds us that mystery is not always an absence of data, but a presence of depth. For every chamber mapped, another question opens. How were the granite beams lifted? How were alignments checked without a modern compass? How did laborers sing away exhaustion under a kiln-blazing sun? Such questions kindle rather than close the mind, inviting future dreamers to refine their instruments, compare new scans against old legends, and continue the dialogue between evidence and awe. Within the monument lies an implicit ethic. The casing stones reflect not only light but responsibility, the awareness that what we build today becomes the inheritance of strangers farther down the river of time. To shape a block is to sculpt the future. In its silent language of shadow and angle, the pyramid argues for work that honors place, for collaboration that outlives ego, for craftsmanship that rewards the touch of bare hands centuries hence. And so we arrive at a final reflection. The pyramid not merely an object of study, but a mirror turned toward civilization itself. Its four faces mark the cardinal directions, as surely as human endeavors orient toward purpose. When storms of sand blur those edges, the faces are still there, waiting for the wind to clear, a gentle assurance that meaning may be obscured yet never erased. In that way, the monument resembles the best within us, resilience shaped into quiet form. Now, as night deepens over the plateau, the temperature slips and the air grows transparent, allowing constellations to bloom in full. One by one, their reflections settle on the cool stone so faint a lantern would miss them, so steady that time itself seems to rest. It is in this tempered hush that I turn, at last, to you. May the measured cadence of these chapters linger like distant starlight, guiding curiosity towards stillness and inviting sleep to unfold at its own gentle pace. The tale of Khufu's monument is complete, yet the conversation between sky and stone continues, calm and patient above the sands. Let your thoughts wander there if they wish, or let them settle into silence, knowing the pyramid will keep quiet watch until dawn.